Howdy folks, Greyhawk 4x4 coming at you again, your resident vintage gamer. And it's Q&A time with Greyhawk 4x4. Let's go. So what this is a group of, I guess they're high school guys, and they may actually be graduated now, but when they started their enterprise called Barrel O Nerds, they basically started a gaming commentary website. They're on YouTube. They got a Facebook page and everything like that. And they were, high school kids at the time. And they have contacted me and said, we are doing a documentary about tabletop gaming, and we wanted to know if you would not mind being interviewed. And how they are doing the interview is they sent me the questions, and I'm going to answer them here on my video here, and then they can edit and take from it what they want to put into their documentary and so forth. So without further ado, let's get into the questions. Okay, so question number one is, what are some common stereotypes of tabletop gamers? Well, I think we know them all. The stereotypes are that they're people that are awkward in social situations, and they're labeled, nerds and geeks and all that. And if that's the case, then yeah, I'm a nerd, I'm a geek. I'm proud of it. And I think if you'd ask any other tabletop gamers, they'd all say the same thing. We're proud to be called that. So, I'm trying to think. There's lots of stereotypes. I mean, one of them is the whole, mom's basement thing, and the ironic part is that I'm doing this in a basement, but the difference is I own this sumbitch. This is my basement. So, anyway, next one. What is the oldest tabletop game that you know about? I'm assuming now when you say tabletop games, I'm assuming you're not talking about just role-playing games. So I'm going to say that the oldest tabletop game that I know of is, well, there's two of them. There's Little Wars by H.G. Wells, the guy who brought you War of the Worlds and all that, the author. He actually created a tabletop war game called Little Wars, and it was based on another game from the 1800s called Kriegspiel, which was actually used by the Prussian military. They created a game to teach their officers maneuvers in combat on a tabletop, and they created a game called Kriegspiel to be able to do that, to make it interesting for them to learn and everything. And then H.G. Wells, in the early 1900s, he created the game Little Wars, which he took from that and expanded it for tabletop wargaming. Here's a picture of Little Wars. So, but if you really want to know the answer to that question, there's only one source that you need, and that's this book right here. It's called Playing at the World by John Peterson, and yeah, it's that thick, and it's basically the history of tabletop gaming. It's everything starting with chess. I didn't want to say chess is the oldest because that's kind of a cop-out. Everybody knows chess, but that's why I went with Little Wars and Kriegspiel. So if you want to look more, either Google it, get this book, either one. If you want to know anything about gaming, this is the book to read right here. Okay, so what's the next? How many dice do you own? I own hundreds of dice, and there is an old saying amongst us old gamers that you never have enough dice. This is just one bag of dice here, and these are probably ones that I don't play with that often. The ones that I play with back here at my table here are in this box right here, and it even includes the penalty box. So when when a particular die is not rolling well for the night, it goes in the penalty box. So there have been nights where there are multiple dice in the penalty box. So next question. How important are dice in the overall scheme of tabletop gaming? For me, I would say that if you're talking about role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games, dice are, if you're saying the other options are, you have dice or you have people that are digitally using a random number generator on their phone or their tablet or whatever, I insist on dice. If I'm DMing, you're rolling dice at the table. It's just part of the game, the sound of it. To me, it's the ultimate in randomness, and I think it just adds excitement and color and texture to the game. So that answers that question. Where did the game of chess originate from? So I guess this is you're testing me here, and I've never been a big chess player. So, but from my limited exposure and knowledge, I believe they kind of traced it back to the country of India. Who knows how long ago, how many, centuries ago or whatever when it started. I believe that's right. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not going to Google it and everything. That's what I think. That's, in my mind, I think that's what it was. How do you feel that D&D has evolved over time? I think that D&D has become way overcomplicated, much more complicated than it needs to be. Gary Gygax was famous for saying way back in the day, when they first came out with D&D, and then it kind of got popular and they started making more supplements and everything. I think it was Gary that said it. It may have been Dave Arneson or one of the other guys that said it to Gary, but the legend is that somebody said, if they ever find out that they really don't need these books, we're in trouble. And what he meant by that was, you can pretty much play something like Dungeons and Dragons with very limited rules. It's all about the role playing and everything. And you can kind of make the rules up as you go, as long as everybody at the table is okay with that and you just want to do more role playing, you can do that. So now, to answer your question, when you get into like 5th edition and all that, there's a lot of mechanics, and not so much 5th edition, but Pathfinder is very, very dependent upon all kinds of rules, dozens and dozens and dozens of mechanics for combat and all this type of stuff. So that's how I think it has evolved, and I don't necessarily think that it's for the better. That's why I love 1st edition, basic D&D, whatever, the old school stuff. Anyway. Let's see. Aside from D&D, what is your favorite tabletop game? My favorite tabletop game was a game called Dark Tower, and it was I guess you'd call it a board game, but there was an actual tower. Here's a pic. I'll put a picture here. So you can see that there's an actual tower that was digital there, it had batteries in it, and it had random encounters that would come up when it was your turn, and you moved around the tower and everything. And it's considered, there's a cult following because it is considered one of the greatest board games ever made. They're very hard to find, and if you do find them, it's rare if they're working. But there's your answer. Let's see. What is a DM? Well, Dungeon Master. I think everybody knows that. I guess that was another test question, I guess. What is role-playing? Well, it's just like acting, except you're doing it, even acting is role-playing. I mean, as it pertains to tabletop gaming, you take on the persona of your character, and to whatever extent you want to role-play is up to you. If you want to get deep into it and talk with a different voice, if you want to animate your actions, you can do all that stuff with role playing. So it's just a limit of how much you want to do for your character. Next question: do you role play? Yes, I'm a heavy duty role player. You can ask anybody that games me back there. I get into my characters. I think it's more fun, and I try to think on my feet to get out of situations, and I try to think how that character would get out of that situation, not necessarily how Greyhawk 4x4 would get out of it, but how my character would. So yes, I do. How important is role-playing to tabletop games? Well, if you're talking about tabletop role-playing games, it's crucial. To truly enjoy the game and the immersiveness of the game, role-playing is crucial. Absolutely. How much time and work do you normally put into making your character? I put quite a bit of effort into it because I want to have a complete backstory, including the character's weaknesses and faults and all that. I want it to be, even if it's what I call a gimped character, if I roll bad and my stats suck, whatever, hey, that's the hand I was dealt, and I'm going to go with it, and I enjoy it. Let's see. What makes a good character? That's an interesting question. I would say, to follow up on the previous question, to have a good character, you have to have a complete character. You have to have a character with a really good, solid backstory that helps add to the campaign that you're in. And you have to, it takes some help from the DM, because if you are good about fleshing out your character and having a good backstory and role-playing and all that, if you have a DM who takes that, and for all the characters at the table, and incorporates that into the story, and then expounds upon that, that is fantastic. That's when role-playing is at its absolute best. When, that DM or Game Master or whatever, depending upon what system you're playing, takes your creation and integrates it into the story. That's when it's really good. Let's see here. What is your favorite dice you own? Well, for future reference, guys, that question should be, I'm assuming you're asking about one. It would be, what is your favorite die that you own? Because one is a die. More than one is dice. So if you're asking what my favorite die is, it would be this guy right here. That is my original D20 from the 70s. And if you notice, there are some of the numbers are not darkened in. Let's see if we can get that to focus there. So some of them are, come on now, I had you focused there. Let's do that. See if we can, see if that'll help. Anyway, you can see some of them are darkened in and some of them are not. And the reason for that is, back in the day, they only went 1 to 0. And that was for 1 through 10, and then you had to, and then they did it again. There was two sets of 1 through 0, and then you had to take something, either a crayon or a pencil or something, and you had to darken in one set, and that would be for 11 through 20. So that, and for that right there would be that is your natural 20. It's a 0, but that's on the side that's in the darkened. That's the darkened 0, so that is natural 20. So that is my favorite die. I've had it since the very beginning, and I still use it. I call it Old Trusty. Let's see. And yeah, in case you're wondering, Old Trusty has spent time in the penalty box. What does house rules even mean? House rules is very simple. It means kind of what I was talking about earlier when they were saying that you don't need all these books and everything. And I'll give you an example. When I DM, say, first edition, there were limits on, if you played anything other than a human, you had limits on what level you could go to. Like a dwarf could only go to level, I can't remember. I don't remember what the level limits were, but I do away with level limits. I don't believe in them, and I also don't believe in first edition they had stats for male versus female. So in other words, the max strength stat for a male dwarf would be different than a female dwarf, or whatever. And I don't do that. Male, female, it doesn't matter. the max is 25 is the ultimate maximum, but that's a whole nother conversation. But those are examples of house rules. I just don't use those limits. I don't believe in those limits, so I just do away with them. So that's my house rule. Let's see here. How did you get into tabletop gaming? It was in the early 70s. A buddy of mine, he and I had been, we'd always played board games and stuff. A lot of different board games. He had a big collection. And one day, I think he was at school, and he learned about D&D. And he then introduced it to me and some of our other buddies that came to his house all the time. And that's how we started playing. I don't even, I want to say it was around 75, 76, something like that. 1975, 1976, something like that. That's how I got into it. And I've been hooked ever since. What has kept you playing tabletop games all this time? The escapism of it. Same reason I play video games. Real life can be very daunting. It can be very exhausting and everything. And for me, there is no better outlet than gaming. Whether it's tabletop gaming, role-play gaming, computer gaming, whatever. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. But anyway, that's what it is. The escapism has the reason I've done it all these years. I enjoy this escapism, and it provides me that, and I love it. I'll never stop. I'll be gaming till I die. Let's see. How has tabletop gaming affected your life? Well, early on, it affected my ability to. It made me a better reader. It made me read more, and so therefore it helped my vocabulary. It helped my reading comprehension. It helped my writing. All that, because you're forced to read all these books. And to Gary Gygax's credit, he never dumbed any writing down in any of the books that he made or anything. He forced you to pick up a dictionary. And look, yeah, back in the day, you had to actually pick up a dictionary. There was no online to go and do dictionary.com or whatever. You had to pick up. So it forced a lot of us. We always had a dictionary nearby, because if we came upon a word we didn't know what it was, we had to look it up. So that's probably the best thing. It helped me at a very crucial point when you're developing those skills. It helped me a lot. What is the most fun memory you have of tabletop gaming? Well, the most fun memory I have if somebody asks me, and the first thing that jumps into my head was around 1980. I want to say it had to have been 86. I was in the Army, Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Me and my roommate were both D&D players, and another buddy of ours at another unit was also a big D&D player. And I think there was a couple other guys, and there was a 4-day weekend I believe it was Thanksgiving weekend, because you had Thanksgiving on a Thursday, and then they gave us Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. So we had a 4-day weekend, and we all stayed there. None of us went home for the holidays or anything like that. We all stayed there, and we were all living in the barracks, and so we all went to our one buddy's room over at the other unit. And we had basically a 4-day marathon gaming session. Here's just one picture. Here's just one picture from that endeavor. I guess I'll use that word. So we gamed as much as we could. We were drinking beer, of course, the whole time. We're gaming. And then, of course, we could order food in. And, when you're living in the barracks, you got lots of disposable income. So we just ordered food in. They'd bring sub sandwiches, pizza, whatever. And we just, we'd crash for a few hours, wake back up, start right back up at it again. That's by far the most fun memory I have. So, next, what do you like about the tabletop gaming community? I like the fact that that everybody is kind of kindred spirits. We all share a hobby that we love, and you can sit down at a gaming table with complete strangers and get into a game, and within a few minutes, you're all friends. That's how the feeling is, you know. That's what I love about the tabletop gaming community. We're getting down here to the end here. Let's see. How have you made friends through tabletop gaming? How have I not made friends through tabletop gaming? Pretty much, for the most part, I'd say about 90% of the people that I have gamed with throughout my life, I'm still friends with on Facebook, or thank goodness for Facebook, because I was able to find a lot of them that I did game with back in the Army and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a no-brainer. Where do you think the tabletop gaming community will go from here? I think that we're already seeing a surge in the popularity of tabletop gaming, and I think things like Kickstarter and social media have helped a lot with that. And imagination is endless, so I think it's going to become much more mainstream than it already is. Is it possible for tabletop gaming to become a mainstream hobby? If so, then how? I think I just answered that. I think it already is. When you have shows like Tabletop with Will Wheaton on YouTube, and you have a game based upon, like, the Walking Dead franchise, it's a tabletop miniatures game that just finished a Kickstarter, and I am a backer. And I think their goal was $50,000, and they raised over $600,000 on their Kickstarter. It's mainstream. You know, I really do think it is. So, what is your favorite thing about tabletop gaming? My favorite thing about tabletop gaming is probably that it is a relatively inexpensive alternative if you look at the cost per hour of entertainment. You can buy a player's handbook and a set of dice, excuse me, and join a group, and that be your only investment for endless hours of gaming and entertainment. And when you compare that to other forms of entertainment, it is a relatively, you know, it's pennies on the dollar compared. Because, you know, we play here on Friday nights for 5 hours, about 5 hours. Our Pathfinder group is a 6-hour session. That's 11 hours of gaming, and I buy a few sodas and the electricity or whatever, you know, that type of thing. And I buy beer, of course, but I would buy beer whether I was gaming or not, so I can't really count that. But so it's a relatively, for the amount of fun you have, you can't. It's pennies on the dollar. That's my answer. And that's it. That's the last one. So, of course, this is a super long video now, 22-minute, you know, video. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if they finish the documentary, and I'm sure that they will, I will make sure and do another video and link it and the whole bit so you guys can find it. That's it, guys. We'll catch you on the flip side.